ICQ Podcast episode 381, Friedrich Schaven 2022 Interviews Part 2. Well, hello and welcome, fellow ham radio enthusiasts, to this, our 381st episode and also our 14th birthday of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio podcast. Supported this episode by Dino Papas, Kilo Lima Zero Sierra, and Philip Heckenbottom, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, and a monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin MNLB is joined by Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Karen, KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund, Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is the conclusion of our interviews from Friedrich Schaven 2022, conducted by our colleagues Chris and Ed. Well, as always, it's your very kind support that keeps your ICQ podcast not only on the air but advert free and paying our way. And as I say, for our 14th birthday, we'd like to thank the initial donors who help us out along our way. And Dino Papas is the first one, so it's Kilo Lima Zero Sierra. And it's happy birthday ICQ podcast. Enjoy the get together every fortnight. Here's to another year. So thanks a lot, Dino, for your kind messages. And also from Phil, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, says, I remember the ICQ birthday was in July, so carry on the great works, catch you all in the talk group, appreciate your efforts and those of all the presenters. So thanks a lot, guys, for both your very kind donations to the show. As mentioned, you can show your value for, say, your ICQ podcast that you receive throughout the year by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate, where not only is there our standard donation models there, but there's some special ones as well to also help mark our 14th birthday. So you can choose one of those to show your support. Right, well, now we're going to head over to the news roundtable this episode, where we're going to join Martin, Dan, Karen, Edmund, and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Indonesia launches its first satellite, and should your club have a chaplain? As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 381 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by our residents in the States, Mr. Dan Romacek, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening.
Hi, Dan. Good to have you. And we've also got Karen, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT. Hi, Karen.
Good evening, Martin.
Good to have you, Karen. And second time, so you'll be getting that feet under the table a bit now and enjoying the fun with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Moving back quickly into Germany, we've got Mr. Ed Durant, DD5LP.
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody. Well, we can't have been that bad 4 weeks ago, if Karen came back again. She's managed to put up with us for once, so I think she's now a permanent fixture. Yeah,
I should have mentioned that. Karen has now joined us as a permanent presenter for as long as she wishes. And we were saying earlier, people never leave the ICQ podcast. They might take sabbaticals, but they never really leave. So it's great to have Karen on board. And I enjoy her comments, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well. So good to have another point of view on the podcast. Now, moving to the UK, where I am, we got Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody. And once again, I'm sitting in my back garden because it's rather hot down here on the south coast today. So if you can hear noises in the background, such as wood pigeons cooing or people slamming doors or talking or any noises off, that's the reason.
Yeah, I got similar. I've got my back door open as well. So just in case if the helicopters go over, I can't do a lot about that, but there's not a lot flying at the moment, so hopefully we'll get through without too much background noise. Okay, let's start the first news story of the day. Indonesia prepares to launch its first amateur radio satellite. Now, this, as we were pre-show chatting, I didn't think Indonesia was as technical as some of our other presenters believe. And, I suppose that's ignorance on my part. And by chatting to people around the world, which is what our hobby is, we tend to learn more about these things. So, Karen, you put this one up. So do you want to go first on it?
Yes, sure. This is interesting because, and we featured this on Newsline, because it seems every country now feels the necessity to put up their own satellite. I mean, much is said about quote unquote space junk, but I think space junk refers to things that are still up there that are no longer functioning. But I think launching an amateur radio satellite is a reflection of the level of expertise people in that nation have in amateur radio, in science, in technology and engineering. So in that regard, it shows a level of commitment and smarts for the people in Indonesia, and certainly the amateur radio operators there. For a more practical purpose, though, it's not just about hams making QSOs, although to me that's exciting enough. I mean, what else do you need in life, really? But it has a very practical purpose because you can use these satellites, as we know, for monitoring the land, what's going on down below, weather systems, emergency communications, and things like that. So you have both an environmental purpose that's fulfilled, and you have an educational one. So it's really a win-win. The fact that it's coming out of Indonesia, which really does have a robust amateur radio society, ORARI, is just fabulous. This satellite was moved to Japan recently, and Japan will be launching it in October. And it will go up to the ISS. And from that point, the ISS will send the satellite on its way.
Well, that's good news. And certainly it was something I hadn't really picked up on that one. Ed, you seem to know more about much more about Indonesia than I did. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, okay. Indonesia is actually a collection of island nations that have been sort of merged together to form a larger nation. And some of those island nations are actually high-tech. They've had a lot of investment from abroad and also within the country to develop into high-tech industries. And they're now looking, of course, to get youth into technology fields through the schools. And this amateur radio satellite is a good way to get young people also interested in space, in technology, in radio, in electronics. So it's not only good for the country to get something up there. They obviously already have their TV satellites and everything else up there, but by putting an amateur radio satellite up there and involving the universities or the high schools, you get more people interested into getting into the technology industry, which is what they need. So it's a win-win situation, Martin.
Yeah, I'll say it's certainly opened my eyes on this one. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one? I mean, it's a youngster thing. Unfortunately, I doubt if it's Morse, although they might have a Morse transcoder.
Yeah, I don't know if it's got much more sound. But no, this is great. And, this also points out the developments that have been made in standardizing satellite technology. We just sent someone to the CubeSat Developers Workshop, and they've made great strides in making this easier to do. And now we're seeing it. Indonesia sending up one. A couple of years ago, Slovakia sent up one. And that's it. It's just getting easier to do.
It certainly is. Well, that's certainly fun that lots of people are doing it. Edmund, I know this is not normally your bag, being an HF operator, but you and I have had limited success with satellite. But what's your thoughts?
I would suggest that you're ahead of me in terms of having limited success, Martin. Was that ringing phone somebody calling us to tell us the answer as to whether this has got CW on it, by any chance? That was something I was wondering about, actually. What bands this satellite will operate on, and if it will be a beacon, telemetry, an FM repeater, or a transponder, and it doesn't say, so I'll follow that one with interest. But very many congratulations to everybody involved in this. To arrange for students to build a satellite and then to arrange for it to be transported to wherever it needs to go on time, to be transported up to the International Space Station, and then to get agreement with everybody who would need to agree to then have it launched from the International Space Station. Organising that is one heck of an undertaking. And if it was my job to do it, I honestly don't know where I would even start. So very many congratulations to everybody who's involved. And I must also confess my ignorance of all things Indonesian. Before I went to Dayton in 2019, I had never travelled outside of Europe. So I'm afraid I can't wax lyrical about Indonesia beyond that. But hopefully this will be their first, but not their last. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I hope so, Edmund. I hope that maybe they put more satellites up, more work with the schools and colleges. That'll be a great one. It's, young people, we've got to find a way into getting people into doing what we do. And space seems to be one of the things to do. Because, once you've got a license and you understand communications, I'm sure a lot of youngsters coming in the hobby will want to do digital modes, the computer connected to a radio type digital modes. But that doesn't matter. That's the start of understanding, and that's solving a problem. Once you've solved that problem, as all of us find out, amateur radio is massive, and we get excited about all sorts of things within it and move around quite happily once you get started. So, good thing in my point of view, as far as I'm concerned. Right, move to our next news story. Karen, you did me this one again. I spotted it and wasn't sure whether to go with it, but I actually agree with you, having chatted to you about it, that hams are seeking to revive the Spy Set Net, and they're going to do this from Bletchley Park. So it's a UK story, although you picked it up, Karen, and I think these are the parasets. So over to you, Karen.
Yes, this story, I love this story because it captures my imagination. I was going to say there are very few amateur radio operators who don't appreciate history in some form or another. I mean, there's a great history to radio itself. CW has a special place in history because of its connection during warfare. And when I read a post on QRZ about this amateur who is wanting to revive this net that he himself was a part of, he might have even been one of the founders some years ago, I thought, wow, yeah, this is great. He wants people who have the transceivers, any spy radio equipment really, and including anything homebrew, wants to get people on and do CW. Now, anything that can keep CW alive is, in my mind, fabulous. I'm late to the game with CW, have fallen in love with it, and so I think we need to keep it going. A net like this is not only exciting and good for CW, it's good for history, it's good for amateurs. And hey, if propagation is going to be good in this solar cycle, even if this is QRP, you might get people further than, I think you might get contacts, certainly outside the UK on this one. I hope the organizer gets a response. I hope this net can be revived. I think it's on so many levels a perfect a perfect hook to rekindle interest and love in old things. People love old keys, right? So why not old CW spy radios? It's the best thing. It's the best thing. So let's cross fingers and let's hope this old equipment gets the dust blown off and gets back in action.
Well, I certainly do, Karen. I actually know somebody who owns an original Parasite with all the bits and pieces in the suitcase as they were when they were parachuted into hostile territories in Europe. And they used to come with a map of Europe that was printed on silk so that it didn't tear. So that's another interesting side to it. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Actually, I did a little Googling, and these actually look somewhat different than the Parasets. But I would imagine that these guys would also welcome Paraset users into their net. You know, it's just it's a little different, but pretty much the same kind of radio. I know a guy here in Southeast Michigan who actually builds replica Parasets, and I actually sold him a Heathkit power supply that was made to power tube circuits. So he's got the whole setup to make these tube circuits. But yeah, other than that, it's great.
Yeah, well, it's great to show some of the old technology and where we came from. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
I'm afraid there's nothing I can add here, Martin, because spy sets and all the things mentioned in this article is an aspect of amateur radio about which I have no knowledge at all, I'm afraid.
Well, you have more knowledge of CW than I do. I don't know it's valve technology, or our cousins across the pond would say tube technology. But could be interesting one, Edmund, even to listen into, see what's going on. All right. Well, I'll pass it then on to Ed. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've just looked up the MK123. It was only issued in 1955 or released in 1955, although it was starting to be designed in 47. So it's a post-war spy clandestine radio station, and looks to me like it's actually built into a case, as you were saying, like the Parasets used to be. And I'm just trying to see what modes it ran, but 2.5 to 5 megs, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, CW Morse only, there we go, and can be hand-keyed using a built-in Morse key, front right corner. Oh, sounds like Ellicraft got the idea from there, perhaps, for a built-in key into the radio, or an external key at speeds up to 40 words per minute. So, yeah, it looks like a nicely built transceiver, and, yeah, great that the net's getting together again. And your comments about if conditions are good, they might get outside the UK. I suspect the problem might be the reverse, depending what frequency they choose. I suppose if they do it on 80 meters, they're okay. But if they go any higher than that, it's going to be, you won't hear the people inside the UK. It'll be just contacts around Europe. But yeah, great, novel little thing. It'd be good thing to have at a demonstration location, you know, like on a field day or even at a ham radio show of some kind, and have somebody operating one of these, because it would certainly generate a lot of questions from the public. And yeah, belong to the Diplomatic Wireless Service. There we go. Yeah, so great. Good on them for getting the net back together. I'm not a CW operator. I have a respect for CW operators, and certainly a big respect for the people that had to use this kind of equipment back in the 40s and 50s. Oh, sorry, the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, well, like yourself, I'm not a CW operator. I'm probably a very big disappointment to Dan, seeing as he looks after my license in the States.
Not at all.
Yeah, but it's not I don't want to, Dan. It's just I never get round to it. But yeah, let's say nice to get the old sets on the air and one thing and another. Moving to our next news story. I think this one, I've got kind of little bits of this have happened at our club, but in a different way. It says, is having a club chaplain appropriate? Now, without agreeing or disagreeing, there are the Christian Amateur Radio Society and there are probably Christian amateur radio groups. If you join those, you will obviously know that you're going to have a chaplain. Others, it may be a dissuader from joining that club. But I don't really know because I'll tell you about my experiences at the end. Edmund, do you want to go first on this one?
Until I read this news story, I had never heard of a radio club anywhere in the world having a club chaplain, and it had never crossed my mind that any club would have one. But this specific club, obviously I don't know where they are, who they are, why they've got one, why it started, why it still carries on. So I am not equipped to sit here and make a judgment on whether having a club champion is appropriate or not in the specific circumstances of this specific club. In general terms, speaking as a Christian who would not be particularly bothered about hearing a prayer or a blessing in any context anywhere, it wouldn't bother me. But if I were attending an amateur radio club and that were to happen, I'm pretty sure my first thought would be, what has this got to do with amateur radio? Having said that, if I were a guest at a club, I would take the view, their club, their rules. Yes, I could put forward probably a very persuasive argument as to why the reasons for having a club chaplain were lost in the mists of time and archaic and outdated. Yes, I could put forward probably a very compelling argument as to why it would discourage or alienate atheists, agnostics, followers of other faiths, or indeed just people who turn up to an amateur radio club to do amateur radio rather than anything else. But at the end of the day, if enough people in the club value it and enjoy it and want it to the extent that it carries on to this day, then if the powers that be turn around and said, well, yeah, okay, fair enough, but we're going to carry on anyway, then they would be perfectly within their rights to do that, rather than going down the line of suggesting to them that maybe they shouldn't be doing it, which I suspect wouldn't gather a entirely positive reaction. An alternative approach may be to suggest that if the club is meeting in a building with more than one room, that the people who wish to partake in the prayer or blessing go into the smaller room if they are the minority and leave everybody else in peace. Alternatively, if it's the majority in the club who want it and partake in it, then the people who don't want it could go into the other room for a couple of minutes. And I suspect from reading this news story, it would only be a couple of minutes. Or alternatively, just do it before the club meeting starts. So if the club meeting starts at 7:30, say, for example, just make it known to attendees that if you want to take part in this, get there at 7:20 and do that first, and then everybody who doesn't want to take part can turn up subsequently. So that is my sitting on the fence kind of view on this one. It is not my place to tell the people who run that particular club that they shouldn't be doing what they want to do, any more than it's my place to take the opposing view and tell the person who wrote this letter that they shouldn't feel the way that they feel, and that if they don't like it, they should just grin and bear it. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you covered a lot of points there that are all very valid, mate. So interesting. Karen, what's your thoughts on this one?
Can you pray for a contact with Bouvet Island? No, I'm just a thought there. Just a thought there. On a more serious note, I like the idea of a chaplain. I think it's really up to the individual club how to utilize the presence of a chaplain. Having a chaplain doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have an opening prayer, although that's a possibility. And certainly in parts of the U.S., and there are parts of the United States that are very, very steeped in Christianity and open practice of, religion and prayer, that would be appropriate. But in other parts of the U.S., and I can only speak to the U.S., it would not be as openly practiced. But here's my take on having a chaplain. I think it is a good idea. And think about it. There are so many hams who are active members of the clergy. Many of us can name them, and I'm sure we may even be acquainted with them. They may or may not be appropriate or want to be chaplains in the club. They may want to just be members and not use their clerical role in such a way. But my thought is this: a lot of clubs have good and welfare people who do the good and welfare. I do that for a Great South Bay Amateur Radio Club, for my club. What's involved there is simply keeping track of people who may be having a personal struggle, an illness, a recovery, a death in the family, sending a card. That's really just the extent of it for me as good and welfare for my club. But it does add an element of warmth and caring and fellowship within club members. And that's important. We're hams, we are brethren in that regard. So the interpretation I'm taking on chaplain is more in that capacity, that perhaps not necessarily someone who sends cards, but someone who, because they are in the clergy, they are people of faith, they're part of a faith community, might visit the home of an ailing club member and offer some support in some way, whatever might be appropriate. Kind of, the Army has chaplains, certainly. We're not an army, but more of a role that way, not necessarily to lead the group in prayer. So this would just be someone who would be called upon as a resource and as a support, a member who has a particular calling to the faith, who might be useful in times of trouble, might be helpful. So that's really my view of it. I do like the idea, just for the record. I think it is super, and if clubs do it, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, as you say, there are fors and against for this, Karen, and it's also one of these things where not everybody's going to agree with you, but it doesn't matter. It's your point of view, and your point of view is as valid as anybody else's. So you put some very good points forward. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, so of course, the source of this was a blog post I wrote based on an item on Reddit that I read on the amateur radio subreddit. And my opinion is as it says in the notes here, I'm completely against it. And I'll tell you the reason for that. The reason is I think that this puts people off more than it helps them. It may help the people that are currently members of the club. They might think it's a great thing, but like this guy said in his post, it just put him off. And I think probably it'll put more people off than it will help. And in these days where clubs are dwindling, I think anything that puts people off is a bad thing. So, and we, like I noted, in Rotary, this became an issue, especially here in the United States. We want our membership to be as diverse as possible. And in my club here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we do have a really diverse group of people. We do have Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and all faiths, Christians, and some of them are clergy. But we hold strictly to a non-denominational kind of thing. We don't offer prayers. We offer quote unquote inspiration. And I'll give you an example. Today at our meeting, we had the director of the local library speak. So the inspiration was about books. The person who offered the inspiration talked about some of her experiences with books over the years, her first book she ever had, and such as that. Totally non-religious. And again, you know, the way, especially the way things are going in this country, tongue-tied, because it just kind of gripes me, because I think in a lot of cases, all this religiosity is just dividing us rather than bringing us together. And so that's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, once again, valid points, and they're your opinion, Dan, and I value everybody's opinion on tonight. From experience, and I'm not going to give his call sign out, but Philip, I'm sure you're a listener, and I'm sure you know which Philip I'm talking about, was a member of our club, and he's since moved away to Northern England. But he was a local reverend. He said he didn't want to be called a vicar. He was a reverend, and he presided at a church around the corner. But he was also an amateur radio operator. In the past, he'd been a chaplain in the RAF, so he'd had military experience as well. Interestingly, when he came out to the club, he took his dog collar off, and he was one of the boys. And in fairness, if there was somebody telling jokes at one end of the hall, you could almost guarantee he'd be in amongst there somewhere, if not leading the joke-telling session. He was also, occasionally you get a very, very strange comment, like I'd say, "Oh, this radio's dead, it's had it," and he'd say to me, "Do you want me to arrange its funeral for you?" And then that was about as far as he ever got with religion at the club, and I think that was good. I know that a few people spoke to him outside of that, and that worked for them. I also visited him a few times at his church for a cup of tea in the afternoon when I was between jobs. I'd have a job at 3 o'clock and a job at 5 o'clock, and I'd have a half hour, 45 minutes to kill. And I'd go and see him at the church. And he'd always arrive at the front door with his dog collar on. And walking back, if they had contractors in there, he'd be telling the contractors what to do. And then we'd walk into his office, and off would come the dog collar. And he'd be talking amateur radio to me for like the next 45 minutes. And I used to say to him, why'd you put the dog collar on when you go outside? And he said, it's because nobody argues with my badge of authority when I got the dog collar on. He said, so the contractors do as I ask them. No, they don't argue. But he had a great sense of humour. So kind of, there's no set answer on this. I think that there are so many now different religious denominations that it would be very difficult to do prayers unless you limited it to one religious group, in which case you're not an amateur radio society. That would kill that part off. So anyway, it doesn't have to kill the hobby. I can understand this guy feeling uncomfortable. We never felt uncomfortable with Philip around, and in fairness, I miss him greatly as a person, because he was always a great laugh. I miss him greatly as a person, but there you go. Right, enough of that. Let's continue with our next news story. Our friends at Essex Ham, who do a lot of online training and training courses in the UK, have released new resources for tutors and clubs, and now it's got the new sections for EMF, which is now part of the licensing system in the UK, and some other bits and pieces in there as well. So, I think it's a good thing they've done this. Let's throw it to Ed Durant. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they've just updated their available resources, and Essex Ham are a really valuable group that do a lot of training, do a lot of providing resources for other people to use. And they've just basically brought up the added to their courses and to their available material to keep in line with the new changes that come in from September the 1st. So good on them as always, which we tend to say when we refer to Essex Ham. Every time they do something, it's for the good of the hobby, and they set a very good example.
Yeah, they certainly do. Because Edmund, you and I are also members of Essex Hams, although we don't live in Essex. But I think we're honorary members, aren't we?
It is, yes, we are. And indeed, anybody can be. You can join. I don't think you even have to be in the UK necessarily, but you can join just by going on their website. I must confess that since I reached the dizzy heights of holding a full licence, I've not really paid much attention to training courses, but anything with the Essex Ham name on it is certainly highly recommended, Martin.
Yeah, certainly is. Dan, you do a certain amount of training, but I don't know if any of this would be of use to you. Maybe the EMF stuff, because I know we have to do that in the States. It's within part of the licensing, because I remember when I did mine about 11 years ago, there were lots of things in the US license that just didn't appear in the UK license. So what's your thoughts?
Right. So I'm always impressed by whatever Essex Ham seems to come out with. And while the UK licensing structure is different than ours, of course, and the question pools are different, I would bet I would find something of use in that trainers, assessors, exam secretaries, and training managers newsletter. You know, some little tidbit about teaching some topic or some teaching method or something. So I'm going to have a look at that.
Yeah, I thought you might, because and they would be more than happy to chat to you. As I say, if you need to contact anybody there, if you can't get to via the newsletter, give us a shout. There's a fair chance I'll see some of the Essex Hams boys over the next few weeks anyway, at some point in time. So if you need extra help, Dan, just let me know. Karen, what's your thoughts on this one? Bit strange for you, I suppose, Essex Ham.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've spoken with Pete a number of times for Newsline Stories. They're a terrific group. Of course, not being in the UK, what they're offering really would have minimum relevance for me here, other than on the technical end. But just conceptually, I have to say, they have always been a wonderful resource, as I've seen through the stories we've done in contacting them. And this proves that it really is helpful to the amateur radio community, particularly those who are not members of clubs or don't maybe live in rural areas and may not have a physical club to go to. That somebody's in their corner, that somebody is always keeping up on changes, requirements, new things that can help them keep current with what they need to know to be a good ham and compliant with things. So I applaud this. I think Essex Ham is great. I wish we probably do have some groups like this here in the States, but frankly, I think Essex Ham probably is the gold standard on how to do it right.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. And Pete, as you mentioned, Pete and I are often found at rallies giggling in a corner. I get on very well with Pete. And in fairness, it just proves that all the podcasters get on because Pete's part of TX Factor. So who said us podcasters don't all get on? There you go. Moving to our last news story. Proposed new ham radio regulations in Slovakia. Interesting. It looks like doing some cleaning up. What do you think, Dan?
Right. So, yeah, I think they're, like you said earlier, they're finally getting around to sort of updating the regulations, and they're adding a lot of new frequencies and stuff for the hams there. And that's great. I'm always impressed isn't the right word. I'm always sort of amazed at how small countries sort of keep on top of their telecommunications issues. I mean, with such a small population, there are less than 6 million people in Slovakia. So I'm just amazed that they have a whole separate department in charge of telecommunications in general, and that they would even have time to pay attention to ham radio. But yeah, it's good that they're updating their regulations.
Yeah, well, I suppose every country, if you think about it, every country's got to really have a telecommunications department, because it is the way that you communicate with the rest of the world. You know, with either your broadcast stations or you can control what goes through the internet and things like that. So, yeah, I suppose they would have to have one, depending on the size. But nice are some of the things that are happening for amateurs by increasing bands and power. What do you think, Edmund?
Yes, well, it's good news, this, isn't it? And this is one of the few countries in Europe that I actually have visited. In, I think, about 1994, I went there on school exchange to the capital city, Bratislava, and that was not long after Czechoslovakia, as it was, had divided in two, peacefully, fortunately. And this is perhaps my first exposure to amateur radio, because the people we stayed with in a flat in Bratislava, the father of the family was an amateur radio operator. And I seem to remember that most of the lights in the building dimmed whenever he went on air, but that's a different story. It was a different world back then in the 1990s. But my other abiding memory of Slovakia is that there seemed to be lots of wide open spaces. We drove up to the Tatras Mountains, which were several hours' drive away. And once we were outside the big city, we were basically driving through open fields and miles of rolling countryside. So maybe it's not a bad location to use a little bit more power, if you know what I mean, as opposed to if you were in a very, very small country that was virtually non-stop sort of cities and towns from one side of the country to the other. So, yeah, this is good news, but it's still only a proposal, I gather. But hopefully it'll get introduced before too long, and it'll help bring Slovakia in line with other countries. For example, 5 megahertz, 60 meters. You don't need a notice of variation for that anymore. And likewise for 630 meters, 472 kilohertz, although of course in the UK both of those bands are limited to full licensees only. So fingers crossed that all these proposals go through.
Well, it'll be a good one. And our latest NOV, Edmund, finished at the beginning of the month, didn't it? So we can no longer operate with a Q in our call sign. Karen, what's your thoughts?
Well, I know this is certainly a different system of privileges than we have here in the States. It sure would be nice to have access to all HF bands right after getting your technician, but that's not happening. But reading this, the main takeaway for me is that this proposal shows a commitment to support people who are relatively new to the hobby. And I know in the States where we have a different system, the greatest losses in licenses year over year are people who get their technicians for whatever reason and don't stay on. They maybe they've had to get it for work, or maybe they have their tech and they've lost interest. If this proposal does move forward, I think this will probably keep the interest level higher for more people. The more you can do, the more you can do. So I think it's I hope it happens. We'll certainly be watching for it and crossing fingers. It would be a nice move for all the hams in Slovakia.
Certainly will, and that's a good one, Karen. Last words on this one, Ed?
Yeah, well, talking about my neighbour country here, or one of them. Yeah, coming back to a point that Dan made about amazing that small countries have departments to regulate radio and such like. Certain countries actually combine that. And what I find quite novel here in Germany, the same regulator that regulates internet and radio also regulates the railway system. So BNetzA covers the railway and TV, radio and internet. And maybe something similar in Slovakia, I don't know, it could well be. The point here is this was a request that went in 8 years ago and is now only being looked at by the people in the regulator. And what they're trying to get to, I would say, summarising it, is what is basically the CEPT usual settings for parts of, for licenses in Europe. And the majority of countries here don't have a technician foundation entry-level license. The majority have a novice and a full license. The novice license is like the general in the US, or the intermediate standard, whatever you wish to call it, in the UK and elsewhere. So there's already a bit of a big jump there. There's no easy entry in Slovakia. You do have to actually do a fair bit of studying to get into the hobby. And apart from that, it's previously the novice only had VHF privileges. They're now going to get HF as well. And the bands, the 472 kilohertz, 5 megahertz and 70 megahertz bands are going to be added to the standard list of frequencies, the standard frequency table. I suspect those bands are only still usable by full licensees. It doesn't say in this document, but that would be my expectation. But no need for an NOV to operate on them. So a lot of tidying up work to bring them in line with, the majority of the continental Europe countries, and going to 100 watts on novice is a fairly common level as well. So yeah, just trying to get in line with everybody else, and yeah, good on them. And let's hope the proposal goes through. We talked about this before we started recording, and one question was, I wonder why now it's getting looked at. Is there a new person joined the team in this small department that's actually a radio amateur and has gone, hang on guys, this has been waiting for 8 years for us to look at it, we'd better get a move on? There are often a lot of radio amateurs that work in the regulators, and it may well be that case. Let's keep fingers crossed that it actually gets accepted. The proposal had a effective start date of July the 1st, but obviously that hasn't happened as yet, so hopefully it shouldn't take them too much longer to rubber stamp it. Back to you, Martin.
Yes, thanks, Ed. And as always, if this goes forward, which it looks it probably will, that's good news for amateur radio. So some interesting news stories this week. Not necessarily a norm, but some interesting news stories to think about. Right, let's find out what the team have been up to since I last spoke to them. Karen, what have you been up to?
Oh, it's been busy. I don't know where to begin. I was an activator for K2A for the 13 Colonies special event. This was my second year doing it. I had a blast, except for the night my rig had a meltdown, but we won't talk about that. That was probably operator error. I think I pushed the wrong button somewhere. But this year I activated, had a lot of fun, and for the very first time, activated some nights doing CW. I was thrilled to jump in and do what I could, and people were very kind. They slowed down because obviously they wanted the contact. So there are some very polite operators out there. It was a really good time. That was a great experience. Now I'm concentrating on something else. I am happy to announce I have had my first portable contact. Now, I have operated portable before. I should clarify that with my club. But this is me with my own rig, my own antenna, my own battery, and at this point, just operating for now from my back garden because I'm still practicing before going into the parks. Logged my first contact from my New York QTH to a fellow in Massachusetts. I believe he was doing soda. So that's kind of neat. Ed, are you listening? I think I got a soda contact. I looked it up. It was done CW once again. So very thrilled about that. Unfortunately, now that I continue to work on that, I'm having, shall we say, an argument with the counterpoise antenna. We have agreed to disagree, so that drama has to be resolved before I take my act on the road and start operating from the parks. I'm hopeful. It's a learning curve and keeping me out of trouble. So that's been it for me, but I think that's certainly plenty, Martin.
Certainly is, Karen, and sounds like you're enjoying yourself in amateur radio. And I know you do a lot of other things as well, but at least you've got out and done some radio, which is good. Dan, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
So our club has started doing these things called AMP. We call them AMP meetings. The Aero is the name of our club, and that AMP stands for Aero Mobile and Portable. So we haul some, it's sort of like mini field day. We haul some gear out of an evening and set up and make a few contacts. And we have a blast. It's just a blast. Well, at the last one, I think you guys might all get a kick out of this. At the last one, I used an antenna that I purchased over 50 years ago when I was a kid and never made a single contact with. And I was actually able to make a contact with it. The antenna was made in the UK, actually. It's a Partridge Electronics joystick antenna. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but basically it's just a very short-loaded vertical with plugs into an antenna tuner. And like I said, I never knew enough about antennas as a kid to really make this thing work. And but I was able to make 3 contacts with it, and I can't be happier. After 50 years of carting this thing around, I finally put it to use.
Well, that's great, Dan. That's great. And, you know, it's surprising some of these antennas we look at and you think, they're not a lot of good. But when the sunspots are up like they are, or we're in the right part of the cycle, I remember sitting in London one day, South London. We were doing a Girl Guides event, and the guy who set the main station up, the aerial must have been short circuit, the antenna must have been short circuit, and it was horrible. And he was getting no contact, so I went out about 100 yards up behind the back of this guide hut in the wooded area, and I sat there with an 817 and a Miracle Whip, and I called him on the frequency, and a gentleman came back from me from Italy. And bear in mind, I was running 2.5 watts. He came back to me and said, "This frequency is in use. Can you move?" And I was sideband. So it does happen. So, but sounds like it's one of those antennas, Dan, that you need good response with a shortened antenna. Right. Let's say what Ed's been up to. What have you been up to, Ed?
Yeah, okay. Well, the first one on my list this week, the listeners will already know because of the show 2 weeks ago. It was the first half of a set of interviews that Chris, M0TCH, and myself made at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen. So we had a great time down there and met a lot of people that we haven't seen for 2 or 3 years, of course, because of the pandemic. And yeah, and got a good batch of interviews there. So we were both very welcomed by everybody we went to. So it's really nice to see the welcoming ways of both national societies and commercial product manufacturers when they see the orange shirts arrive. So That's actually very good. And last week's GB2RS News Bulletin, the top item was, of course, that the RSGB had talked to ICQ podcast. So both ways respect there. So that was a really nice thing. And in fact, this edition's feature will be the second half of the set of interviews. So worth listening to. So stay on board when we finish this section. What else have I been doing? Yeah, I've actually got myself into a private beta for a messaging software app for SOTA messaging, but it's a little bit different, as in it actually uses the FT8 network to send the messages through. So quite a novel use of that, thousands of possible stations around the world being used actually to send messages into the SOTA system for spotting where you are when you're on a summit, or indeed for sending out SMS messages if you need to send a message home to somebody. So a very nice piece of software, but I say it's still in private beta at the moment. When it finally gets released, I'll probably do a feature on it for ICQ podcast. And the last on my list is I've been busy surveying, so in other words, specifying all the summits in another HEMA region. It's HEMA in Germany. This time it's Rhineland-Pfalz, or Rhineland-Palatine, as the English translation is, and also Saarland in the same area. And we should have that added into the HEMA system in the next couple of weeks. And HEMA, for those that don't know, is similar to SOTA, but for smaller hills that are only got a prominence of 100 to 150 meters. So quite a few more of them in certain areas, quite a few less of them in other areas. So another portable operations possibility. And that's about it for this month, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've been busy, mate, and enjoying yourself, which is the important thing. And I know you, having spoken to Chris, you and him enjoyed Freakshaven, so that was good. Edmund, what have you been up to?
Very little. Since the beginning of July, I was listening to a conversation on a new repeater locally. I'll come on to that in a minute. Earlier today, and the consensus was that recently 80 metres and 40 metres have not been particularly good. We're well into the summer doldrums apparently, but 20 metres has been better, and if you've been in the right place at the right time, then it's particularly good. So congratulations on your 2.5 watt contact there, Martin. You also mentioned quite rightly that we are not allowed to use the letter Q in the prefix of our call sign anymore. That ran throughout the 30 days of June. And I half-heartedly challenged myself to try to make 300 contacts, which would equate to 10 per day throughout the month of June. Now, I'm a rag chewer. I don't do rubber stamp contacts at 100 miles an hour. So whilst some people might think I could knock out 300 contacts in a weekend or not much more, by my standards, that's quite a lot. I didn't quite reach it. I got 276, so 20-something short. The good news is, though, that most of the things that I wanted to achieve, I did manage to. The only two I didn't were contacts via satellite. Yet again, I failed, but then I didn't really try, so that's my own fault. The other thing I didn't manage was a contact on 6 meters using a mode on a frequency above 50.5. Mentioning 6 meters, incidentally, I don't know if it's just me, but this year's sporadic E-season I found to be quite disappointing. It got going late, and unless I've always been in the wrong place at the wrong time, which is quite possible, the openings on 10 metres and 6 metres don't seem to be particularly good either, or at least not so far. So I'm crossing my fingers for better things in the weeks ahead for all of us. But everything else that I wanted to do, I did achieve, such as, for example, slow scan TV contacts on 40 meters, some digital FT8 contacts, going out portable, using the upper bands that I don't use quite so much. So I didn't hit the target in terms of QSOs, but in terms of actual quality contacts, I think I did all right. And I actually spoke a fair bit of Italian, which was interesting because I don't speak that language at all. In repeater news, a new old one has come back on the air. The city of Brighton, or maybe I should say Brighton and Hove, always used to be the largest urban conurbation on the south coast, and may still be. I'm not entirely sure these days. But in 2019, it lost its last analog FM repeater. There have been a few DMR repeaters on the air since then, but the last remaining FM repeater shut off in 2019. It was on Brighton Racecourse, on a building at the top of Race Hill, which was a really good site, really good site. But unfortunately, the owners decided to redevelop the site, so GB3BR had to quite literally leave the building, and it's been off air ever since. However, in the last few months, a new site has been found to the west of the city this time, because the old racecourse site was to the east of the city. So this time it's on high ground out near Hove, and because BR reputedly stands for Brighton Repeater, the main object of the exercise was to put a good signal into Brighton itself and the surrounding areas, and initial reports seem to suggest that has been successful. However, as an added bonus, unexpectedly, the signal does seem to get out to the west better than expected as well. So sitting here at my QTH midway between Worthing and Brighton, I can get a very strong signal into and out of the repeater using my collinear. Whether I would do the same with a handheld sitting here in my back garden, I have my doubts. I haven't tried it. I might be able to open the thing, but I would probably end up putting a scratchy signal in. But it's a really good site. Again, it's on a different frequency this time, because apart from anything else, the new repeater keeper only had cavities that were suitable for the wide 7.6 megahertz split. BR used to be on the traditional 1.6 megahertz split with the output on 433.150. So if you're local and if you've got that programmed into any handhelds, you'll need to reprogram them. But the new version is the output is on 430.8125 with narrow deviation. And at the moment it's a standalone unit, but I know that the keeper is working on some all-star technology, and I think ultimately the plan is to link it to GB3RW repeater Worthing, and maybe a few other repeaters on the West Sussex coast as well. So it's always nice to have something new on the air. And one final comment to anybody worldwide listening to this: if you are aware that a new repeater has come on the air close to where you live, even if normally you don't do VHF or UHF, and even if normally you don't touch repeaters with a barge pole, because I know there are people out there who really don't like them at all for reasons that I fully understand. I would never knock anybody who suggested that repeaters were not the best thing ever. But even in that circumstance, if a new one comes on air close to you, then if you're driving around the local area anyway, put a few calls through and see what the coverage area is like, particularly if you are attempting to access it from towards the edge of its expected coverage area. And then once you've done that a few times, contact the repeater keeper and just give them reports of how strong or not the signal was in the various locations that you tried, because in almost all cases, even if the repeater keeper has not expressly made it known that they would like to have reports from the local area, in almost all cases, if you send them one, they will really, really appreciate it. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, I remember when BR, back in when I first got licensed, there used to be a repeater. I forget which repeater it was, but it used to be a repeater in London and BR. And before they put CSS on them, we're still using tone burst. You could key up, and it was pot luck whether you got the London one or the Brighton one. And I live in London, so yeah.
I've got a feeling the one in London, which I think has been off air for a couple of years, was GB3LW London Weekend.
Yeah.
That was on top of the old London Weekend Television tower block / studio complex, whatever the correct name for it is. But I think, I'm certain that ITV have moved out of there a couple of years back, and I've got a feeling that the building is being or is about to be demolished, which, if I'm right about that, is a terrible, terrible, terrible shame. But I won't get misty-eyed on the merits of the old ITV regional companies, and especially not LWT, that I did have a very soft spot for in the late 90s when I lived on the outskirts of London for a bit.
Yeah, know what you mean, mate. Know what you mean. But, yeah, I always thought it was funny. Right, so what have I been up to? Well, obviously I do 2 meters, 4 meters, 70 cents. That goes without saying because I enjoy those bands. But I did have an HF contact this afternoon. I had about an hour to kill, and I thought, I'll take my FT817 to my back postage stamp back garden, or backyard as our American companies would call it. I put effectively a mobile whip onto the aerial socket with a couple of radials, and running. It couldn't have been any more than 5 watts, and it might have even actually been down to 2.5. But from my house in South London, I worked into Belarus this afternoon. Had a contact with a guy. Also tried to work, there were only 2 stations on 20 metres at that time that I could hear. I tried to work the Italian, but he was deaf. You know, I needed far more power to be able to work him. Have been creating a few more cables and getting bits and pieces together because I've been building a little takeout box with my 817 in it and all the bits and pieces I need. So all I have to do is pick up the battery from the shed, pick up my takeout box, and grab an antenna as I go out the door, and I should be good to go. I haven't done as much VHF operating as normal because I've been stripping the radio out of my car. Those who've been listening to podcasts for a while know that I wrote a car off about 2 years ago when a lady pulled out of a junction when I was right on top of it. I was on the main road and I T-boned it. My car was written off. I then took Mrs. B's car, which was a little baby Honda Jazz. And they were like TARDISes. It looked like a small car until you got inside it. It was like a TARDIS inside. It was bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. And, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. But bought Mrs. B another car as well. Or we bought a car, as you know, about a year ago. And in fairness, I probably only put 1.5 tanks of fuel in it. And we're 7 months into the year. This year's only had 1.5 tanks of fuel. Because all I do is use it to go to the club on a Monday night, and not every Monday night. So decided it just wasn't worth keeping it. We've gone down to 1 car. So anyway, there we go. Doing some bits and pieces on Carol's car just to put some bits in it for me so that I don't make it look like a pig's ear with cables everywhere. Also did last week, I did a talk for the Cray Valley Club in North Kent. I went over and we did a talk on oscilloscopes for them. And that was pretty well received, I think, from the people in the room. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was good. And I've been contacted by Nick from Denby Dale to ask me if I'll do something for him as well. So not sure what I'm going to be doing for Nick at the moment, but potentially I'll have a talk lined up for him as well. So all in all, busy all the way down the line. I operate as much as I can, but we still keep busy. Right? We've all been very, very busy. So all that's left for me to do is thank the guys for turning up tonight and helping me record this. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romacek, KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure as always.
Great to have you, Dan. I'd like to thank Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT.
Always a pleasure. Very glad to be here and see you again very soon.
We will keep in touch, as you well know. You don't get out of it that easy. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Many thanks for having me on, Martin. Always a pleasure.
That's great, mate. No problems. And also like to thank Mr. Ed Rant, DD5LP.
No worries, mate. Till the next one.
Yep, we'll obviously more to do. Okay, I'll say 73 to you all, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73, guys.
73.
73
to everyone.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief for me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here of the IARU monitoring system in Region 1, and they've identified an unknown signal transmitting in the 15-metre band. Now it's been heard at 21003.5 kilohertz for several days with long transmissions, and they've also heard it as well several times at 21122 kilohertz as well. Now, at the moment, while it can't be officially confirmed, that there's a suggestion that this could be a radar transmission, and as I say, they're looking potentially in an area of Iran for this signal. So, as always, they're looking for anybody who might have any information to forward their way. We'll put a link to their group in the ICQ podcast webpage, as if you've heard that signal at all, as they try and identify, as I say, that intruder in the 21 megahertz band. Now, next news story is the Radio Club of America Mentorship Program has launched a new program in relation to youth mentorship. This provides opportunities to young professionals to learn from the experiences of more seasoned members of the Radio Club of America. And so after completing an application to participate in the year-long program, interested members will be contacted by the committee and matched up with the appropriate mentor-mentee matching up there. So certainly some good time here to actually encourage youth into the hobby and tap into the wireless and STEM related careers that it could potentially offer. So basically the ARC are saying they've recognised it's important. A new value for our membership was to have more experienced members provide help to newer members who are relatively, say, inexperienced in the wireless industry. And that's a quote from John Fasella, the president of the Radio Club of America. So we'll put a link to this again on the ICQ podcast webpage if you want to get involved and understand the stuff that's going on there. Listener Stefana Latimer dropped us a line and said, could we give a shout out to the British Inland Waterways on the Air event? It's taking place in a month's time in the end of August, the weekend of 27th and 29th of August, which if I remember right is a UK bank holiday. The event is open to all amateurs who are boaters, cyclists, walkers and other users of the canals, rivers and towpaths, riverbanks, etc. that they use for recreational use. Even lakes and reservoirs that are used for recreational uses are classified as inland waterways. So a great opportunity to get involved. The website address here is November Hotel Alpha Romeo Golf.uk/BIWOTA. It might be a bit difficult to write that one down if you're driving, but again, as always, we'll make sure that's on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to check that out. Talking about upcoming events as well, in a couple of weekends' time, the International Lighthouse and Lightships Weekend is being on the air for its 25th anniversary. And despite getting things back up and woken up post COVID, there's going to be over 200 entries from around the world covering Germany, Australia, USA, UK, but also smaller countries including Barbados, Cyprus, Isle of Man, Malta, Trinidad and Tobago. So, as I say, celebrating the 25th anniversary, so since 1998, the group has continued to grow all the time. And as I say, you're more than welcome to get involved, have fun, and introduce yourself to the lighthouses and lightships that will be on the air that weekend. The website address for more information is illw.net, so India, Lima, Lemia, whiskey.net. Right, now we're going to head over to our features episode, which is the follow-up from Chris and Ed's visit to Friedrichshafen as they complete their interviews they conducted at the show this year. As I say, guys, hope you enjoy the feature. And as I say, great to hear their interviews from that show.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
So we're here over in Germany at Friedrichshafen 2022. I'm joined by Bob Inderbitzen from ARRL. Welcome, Bob.
Well, hello. It's good to hear from everybody, and it's great to be here at Friedrichshafen.
It is. It's great to see you again. I think we last saw you over in Dayton, I think about 3 years ago as a podcast. So it's fantastic to see.
Yeah, and then a couple of years off, but we're back again.
Yeah,
so it's
it's phenomenal. It's just the fact we've all been away and we've come back and we've seen the same people. It's
like a big reunion.
Fantastic. It is. So, how have things been at the ARRL?
Good. I mean, coronavirus, of course, was a difficult time for everyone, but in the true Yankee Doodle fashion of amateur radio, we found ways to continue to connect and be together, and there was some reinvigoration of HF. We met a lot on Zoom to hold meetings and presentations, and we got through it.
You mentioned, we were chatting earlier about Field Day and the fact that people are now, during the pandemic, you couldn't meet in person. The rules, I think, changed a little bit.
And, so, ARRL's annual Field Day is always a very popular event in June. And so we modified the rules a bit to encourage more people to operate from home because of social distancing. And we knew clubs weren't going to gather in the typical fashion. So for 2 years in a row, that really reinvigorated participation. But I also think it introduced a ton of people to developing HF in their own homes, putting up wire antennas, buying that first HF radio. And so I think it's contributed in some ways to reinvigorating some of the new licensees to HF.
Yeah, well, we certainly found in the UK there was a big interest in amateur radio during the pandemic, and we got quite a few people got the license and things, but I don't know how that compares to maybe in the States.
Yeah, so, licensing in the United States has seen a rather regular 30,000 or so every year. And even throughout the pandemic, we continue to see a high number of licensees come in each year. I wouldn't say that it was up or down. We sort of count on those 30,000. The real focus of ARRL the last couple of years has been how to move a new licensee from the database to being an active ham. And so Field Day, building things, reinvigorating radio clubs, those have all been very important for us.
Excellent. That's really good. And Dayton just happened. How did that go this year?
So Dayton was good. I think they published numbers that were just a bit shy of 2019, but we were still very busy. ARRL had just around 100 people on its team, and so we were a hustle and bustle throughout most of the convention.
That's a big team.
And it was fun to leave the show with a couple of shopping bags and some new gear.
And Bob, I know you're always really busy at these events. I remember we saw you at Dayton and you were running around, and I'm sure it's the same here. With lots of people very interested in. Do you get many overseas members joining at these sorts of events?
Yeah, so we have approaching 10,000 members overseas, and so not being here for a couple of years meant that we couldn't connect with our international members in person. Yeah. So it very much is like a reunion. We're having a good time meeting and greeting our international members. QST is extremely popular in Europe and much of the rest of the world because of product review and because of some of the regulatory activities of ARRL. And so it's good to connect with that that part of the community again.
Sure, and in fact, I'm one of them. I'm a member, and I get QST online. I don't get the paper version anymore, and it works really well.
And DXCC, of course. A ton of people come to the booth here in Friedrichshafen just to turn in their QSL cards for checking for their first DXCC application or endorsements.
I noticed the guys behind us are feverishly working away, looking at QSL cards and making notes. What's going on there, Bob?
Yeah, so so applicants for DXCC will bring their cards or their cards for endorsements if they already have DXCC and they want to get a few more on the award. They'll bring their cards here, and volunteer checkers from mostly out throughout Europe are here to check the cards and return them to them during the show. And this way they don't have to transport their cards to the United States or mail their cards. They can save a couple dollars doing that. And so we've got card checkers from France and Germany and Switzerland and Italy all helping each other check those cards and promote DXCC.
It's a good team event.
It's
so
great.
How many folks you've got? How many folks have travelled then to here to Germany for the event?
Yeah, so the ARL team from the United States includes ARL President Rick Roderick and CEO David Minster. David's been with the staff now for approaching 2 years now, NA2AA. And then Bob Nauman, our Director of Operations, W5OV, and myself. So there's just a small team of us here, and mustering through our poor German. That many we're quite embarrassed that so many of the German community speak such good English.
That's the way. I'm the same.
But between the food here and the drink here, I think the international language of food really gets us through.
So last night I was down by the lake, and I just arrived yesterday in my camper van, and Google Translate's a very useful tool.
Yes, I'm using it a lot. That's my crutch here. So yeah, but it's a very warm community here, and it's great to be back at Europe's largest ham radio convention.
It is. Bob, thank you very much for your time, and have a great
event. It's super to talk to you today from Germany.
Great, thank you. Bye-bye. I'm joined by Michael Zwingel, who is our call sign is Oscar Echo 3, Mike Zulu Charlie. And Michael is the president of the OVSV, which is the Austrian Amateur Radio National Society, and I believe you've been the president now for 20 years.
Yeah, actually that's correct. But still we think when our visitors go on this blue carpet of our booth here in Friedrichshafen, they expect some innovation, some new things, and not only tradition. So that's where we are actually focused on.
And looking around, you got some great exhibits on your stand. It's quite a nice stand you got here. Lots of things to see, and I can see you've got a cabinet there with some technology inside. Perhaps you can tell us what you're showing here today at the fair.
Yeah, we show several different projects. One is called WRAN, which is an access technology for users that would like to participate in Hamnet, but do not have line of sight.
Sure. Now, Hamnet, so Hamnet, you were chatting to me earlier about Hamnet. So that is an IP-based network, but it's based on radio. But you were telling me it's based currently only on certain frequencies, and therefore
it's running mainly on 2.4 gig and 5.7 gig. So what you need in that frequency range is a line of sight, but you get speed up to 100 megabit and sometimes even more. And it is totally independent of the internet, although it uses internet-like technology, so IP. We are offering a lot of different applications or services on the Hamnet, which is SIP telephony, voice over IP, video conferencing, file servers, and I don't know what. Also, there's access points for APRS servers and so on. But some users or some radio amateurs actually have a problem with their location not having line of sight to the repeater site.
And WRAN then is the new technology that you're introducing or developing to allow access to more people to Hamnet.
Exactly. So bringing down the frequency range in the sub 1 gigahertz range, which is below 1 gig. Obviously the 6 meter band is one that is proposed, the 2 meter band and the 70 centimeter band. So the new technology is SDR based. and will cover all these bands, power about 30 watt.
Sure.
So already some power, and it will enable multi-user and multi-access. So several users in an area can actually use the same access point at the same time.
Sure. And just on the Hamnet subject, so whereabouts, where is that today in the world? Where is that? What coverage do we have?
Now, actually, the idea of Hamnet, or having a high-speed data network for amateur radio only, this idea has been created in Austria many years ago, and from Austria it spread it across Europe, especially also Germany is very well covered. Austria is well covered, but all the other countries, Switzerland and so on, surroundings, but entire Europe, you can say, and it even spread it to the US.
Okay.
It's a success story, because also for emergency communication,
Sure.
this is a vital backbone network.
And it's growing, so you're looking to expand that out, or Hamnet is looking to expand that into other countries, I'm guessing?
Yeah, we are going to expand the network and giving easier access to our members.
Sure. Sounds very exciting and very innovative, and lots of innovation here on the stand here today you're showing.
Yeah, we got some other projects,
Sure.
if I may introduce Meshcom to you. Meshcom is a kind of texting application, so like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, I don't know what you're using on your smartphone. You can actually also do that on amateur radio. We are using IoT modules that do LoRa modulation, long range, low power. It's an IoT standard that is readily available, so very cheap hardware module can be bought, and we provide software that we have done by radio amateurs, so that you can actually use your smartphone with a little app to send text messages to your friend. What's the special thing about it? It actually forms a mesh network, which means each and every node, each and every station is also acting as a repeater, and so it's forming a very flexible, self-creating and self-healing network.
Sounds very interesting. So you're taking some established technologies that exist today and adapting them to work with amateur radio.
That's correct. So in this case, we are using LoRa technology, which is a kind of spread spectrum modulation.
Yeah.
And there is some spreading gain, which we use to actually cover long range up to 100 kilometers with only 100 milliwatt on 70 centimeter, which is extraordinary.
And you mentioned that you've got some funding from the ARDC for some of these projects.
That's correct. For some projects, especially the WRAN project, we received also funding from the US. And that helps us a lot, because so we can actually fund necessary software development and also hardware development at the same time.
Sure, that's very, 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 very interesting. Very good that you're getting funding and people are supporting what's going on. And yesterday we were chatting yesterday about this, and you would show me some information about EMC and some of the interference issues.
That's true. We have created a new platform which is called the Institute of Citizen Science for Space and Wireless Communication, which focuses on research and new technologies like this IoT stuff that we just mentioned, that we use with Meshcom, but also the new OFDM modulation we are using in the WRAN project, where we got the funding for. But on the other hand, it's not just about using the spectrum most efficiently and in an innovative form, but also to protect the spectrum is one of the focus goals of this new platform. We are active in many of the standardization bodies on a national but also international level, and we are trying to make sure that the spectrum that we are capable to use and that has been given by ITU, that this spectrum can be used and is free of interference. And what we see right now, especially with the monitoring system, this electromagnetic monitoring system that we installed, similar to the German monitoring system. And when we look at the pictures there, we see already a lot of interference sources. There's photovoltaic on solar panels and the solar inverters and things like that you have mounted on the rooftop, which is a problem. Then we see the in-house power line stuff still around. We see LED LED lighting systems that cause a lot of interference on a variety of frequency ranges. So there is still a lot of things to do in the standardization area.
And of course, this event isn't just about meeting members of the clubs and that sort of thing. It's also very important for meetings with other national societies and the IRU, I believe, as part of this event.
Yeah, of course. So we use the ham radio to meet and discuss. So meet with representatives of other societies, meet with IRU representatives, discuss things that are of importance for the future. So we think that it's very necessary to not just look back on our tradition, what we have done 50 years ago, 100 years ago. That has been a lot of fun at that times and very interesting at that times. But now it's more important to look in the future, to look ahead, to look how we attract new people from other areas like the maker community, the hacker spaces, the IoT, LoRaWAN. So all these guys that are experimenting with wireless communication. But they are somehow not considered being real radio amateurs, although by definition they are. Yeah. They are perfectly fitting into our definition of what is a radio amateur. Experimenter with new technology in the wireless sector. So we would like to be more open in this direction, look more in this direction, give them space and resources for their experiments within amateur radio and being considered part of our community.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you very much for your time. If people want more information about the OVSV, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, the best place is our website, oevsv.at, or look at the new platform, icssw.at, which gives you all the necessary information and contact links to follow.
Perfect.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the show. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Oh, with Graham from BHI Noise Cancellation Products in Friedrichshafen at the ham radio, and he's actually got some new products to show us this year. He's come over from the UK. As you know, BHI is a British company and one of the leaders in noise cancellation. So, Graham, you're telling me you've got a new inline module. I know this. I know there used to be a different one because I had one some years ago, but. Bigger and better, or smaller and better, we could say, perhaps.
Sort of. It's there was a product called the ANEM Mark II Noise Away, which was a nice little inline unit that was quite simple to use with push buttons. That went obsolete because the technology, it was like based around an ASIC chip. We couldn't get any more. So the newer technology that goes in all our products, we put into a new product called the inline module. So it's effectively slightly larger than the old ANEM, but it allows you to connect a radio in to the audio in speaker level, and then it allows you to connect a speaker to the extension speaker socket on it, and then there's a separate headphone socket. We've bigged up the amplification, so it's now 7 watts audio, and the controls are on one end, and the connections are on the other, so you can almost have it in line either on the top of your extension speaker or on a shelf in your shack. So it's quite a nice, neat, compact little unit. The switch, so you've got off, bypass, so even if you didn't want the DSP on, you can bypass the audio. Then there's an on switch, and then there's DSP with 8 levels of filtering, and you can just select those to suit your own system. As you know, with our technology, it's almost based around a speech extraction system. So through the passband of the audio, sort of 4.5 to 50 to 4.5 kilohertz, something like that, the speech passes through, but you, the user, decide how much noise you let through depending on which filter level. So we launched this not that long ago, and in fact, if you opened it up, you'd recognise the electronics, because effectively it's the same electronics that's in the NES 10.2 Mark IV. But I had this sort of little light bulb moment. I thought, hold on, couldn't I put that in a box and make it a speaker version, which is what we did.
Yeah, just jumping a much higher level question here. Now, it's obvious that adding basically any of your external units to an old radio is going to bring some improvement. But can you use it with the modern radios as well? And is it better than what you'd get stock from the factory on one of the large manufacturers' radios of today?
I guess that's the most common question I get asked. All I can tell you is what customers tell me. There's a 101 rig that's quite a new radio. I think it's Yaesu, yeah.
FT
that's got a lot of technology, and it's got a good DSP. And we've still got customers that, you know, maybe aren't technical enough to operate all the controls, use our DSP in line. There's 7300 from ICOM. And all the modern rigs, people still like just to stick our DSP in the extension speaker socket on the audio path, press a button, noise gone. So whilst the radios, more modern radios, are catching up, and some of them have, you know, they've got very good DSP noise cancelling, we do find a percentage of customers love just connecting our DSP in.
Yep. Oh, great. Okay. Chris, you were saying you had one of these. Was it one of those or another one earlier version?
Yeah, I have the NES 10-2, which is the small speaker. I think we're probably way of describing it, which is, I think it's amplified, isn't it? Amplified speaker that you plug into your rig. Works really, really well. I think I've got the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. You've now got the Mark 4. How has that evolved over the years, Graham?
Well, funny, we're here in Friedrichshafen. In 2002, I had a bit of space on the W&S booth, probably about 3 foot by 2 foot, with that one speaker. That one had dip switches on it and had a little 2.5 watt audio amp. Very quickly, we made some changes and we put a switch on the bottom for bypass. And then we made that was the Mark II. Then the Mark III came out with the rotary switch at the back and some improvements. And it's just technology changes. You can't get the bits and you try and make improvements. And here we are with the Mark IV, where the feedback from customers is important, because everyone used to sort of, well, the negatives you need to take as positives. And one of them was the on-off switch was at the bottom. And when you've mounted it in portable, which it is quite useful for, people said, I can't get to the bottom switch. So there's a little tiny 3-position switch at the top. So you've got off, bypass, on and DSP. So we've sort of tried to make the improvements. I know there'll always be a negative. Someone with great big banana fingers will say the switch is too small, but we try and take everything on board.
So you're taking customer feedback essentially and improving the products?
Well, actually, every product we sell goes out with a customer feedback card. We've done that for 20 years. And funny enough, on that note, I haven't been so busy, I haven't been able to do the PR because it's BHI's 20th anniversary year.
Wow.
And I should be I am going to celebrate it at some point in the next couple of months, but it's been that busy that April went by and it's gone.
So a couple of things, I suppose. Obviously the pandemic's happened, and I don't know how that's affected things. Obviously we now come back, these events are happening again, etc. And I guess also, and it may be linked to it, the components and shortages at the moment. We get a lot of people are telling us they're struggling to actually manufacture things because
we sort
components.
of had a heads up, because a couple of our parts, big parts that we use in everything, were given a lifetime buy. So we've actually invested in a number of years worth of stock as a lifetime buy. And then we got caught by the Texas Instruments amplifier issues because of the current climate and the shortage of chips for electric cars. And but we're okay. We're ahead of it. You know, we're ahead of the curve. So far so good.
Yeah, okay, and I'm just looking around the table here, and I see a couple of other new things I haven't seen before. One's the bypass switch, and also this other little switch over here, which, I don't know, you may have had that for some time, but...
Yes, the bypass switch was a feedback from customers. So there's a dual in-line noise cancelling unit, and there's a compact in-line dual in unit. And basically, they don't have a bypass feature. We decided in our wisdom that if someone's spending a couple of £100 on a unit, why would you put bypass? But actually the customers should be getting what they want. And a number of customers said, we want to be able to bypass your unit when we don't use it. So the bypass switch works with both the dual inline and the compact inline, and it's just a little box with a push button, a latching push button that allows you to connect it up to either unit and bypass the electronics or not. So it just gives customers the bypass option.
Yeah, and it's such a small thing to add. It takes hardly any space. And, again, something from customer feedback. Now, I see something that looks really nice here. We've got, what's this? NED SP 1962 KBD. amplified DSP speaker install module. So this is something that goes inside the radio then? Or?
Well, it's funny you should mention this one. This is our latest speaker install module. Now, you mentioned you'd had a previous unit of ours, a small black box.
Yeah.
That actually had our previous install module inside, and the parts went obsolete. So this is a replacement for the NEDSP 1062 KBD. We love our numbers. I know they're not catchy. So we just called it the NEDSP 1962. Right. So it's a bigger amplifier, 7 watts, and it's basically going to come as a kit with labels, with drilling instructions, connections, and you'll be able to open your ICOM SP21 Kenwood speaker and then mount this unit inside and put it in between the speaker and the connections, and then suddenly your lovely extension speaker becomes a lovely BHI DSP noise cancelling speaker.
Very, very good idea, because whenever we add things external to the radio, there's a certain amount of, well, it's got to sit somewhere, but this particular one builds into your existing external speaker. It's a very good idea, and actually looking at it, because it's got it set here so we can actually see inside what's going on, and it's very small inside, so that's going to fit into almost any speaker case.
Exactly, and it's literally going to have two wires for the input, ground and signal, 2 wires for the output, ground and signal out, and then the power socket. It will come with a preformed wiring harness and push buttons. We've made some improvements over the previous version, so there's an overload LED. You've got a bit more control over that, so you can see if you're overdriving it. And yes, so we're hoping, we've got stock. I've just got to finish off the documentation, but I thought I'd bring it to the show to launch it and let people see.
Yeah, good for. Thanks for the exclusive on the launch there for the podcast, and very, very, very neat little thing. Yeah, I've come to that. Yeah, I was going to say then, how do people find out more about BHI?
In Friedrichshafen, at the moment at the show, all our products are available online at wemo.de. But in the UK, it's www.bhi-ltd.com, and we've got a new shop that we've launched that's a bit easier to use, and you can go there, or you can find one of our authorised distributors or dealers in the UK and in Europe, and they'll be happy to sell you our products.
Do you have dealers in the US?
Yes, I was recently in Dayton at the Hamfest. I thought I'd go and brave it, and it was really good. My main dealers in the US are DX Engineering and Gigaparts.
Okay, Graham, thank you very much for taking the time. You're always very welcome into ICQ Podcast, and we appreciate that very much. We wish you well with the new products. You, like a lot of the smaller manufacturers, have had to get their way through the pandemic, and we're actually, quite honestly, very happy to see that you have, and wish you all success for the future.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I'm glad
happy
to
20th.
be here. Yes.
Okay, so we're here at day 3 at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen 2022. I'm on the QRP Lab stand with Hans Summers. Morning, Hans.
Good morning.
And day 3, so very tiring experience.
Very tiring. I've been standing a lot, and as you can hear, my voice is gone as always.
I've walked past for 3 days, 2 days, and day 3, and every day I come past your stand is absolutely mobbed with people asking questions about the products, and very popular stands.
Yep, and it's the same every year. We have quite a good following, and so everybody wants to ask about the products and buy something if they can. The main problem I have is the luggage. I can only fit so much in my suitcase.
Yeah.
And
well, it looks like things have been selling very well. Well, we'll come on to that actually. So, obviously we've been through the pandemic. How has that affected the business?
Well, we've had successive years of growth even throughout the pandemic. So it has been very difficult. It was difficult to concentrate at home when the kids were home with homeschooling. It's been a downer without the Hamfests, and they generate extra sales and also recharge me and re-energize me, and so we haven't had those, so that's been a problem. But it's been good. We've got lots of new products and had lots of time to work on those. And sales are good. Sales have been increasing, and in the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a period where there were very, very low sales, and I think everybody was worried about what was going to happen. But in the end, I think that was balanced out by some people who had maybe more hobby time, who were spending more time at home. So
they're able to work on the kits.
Yeah.
So you mentioned new products. So what are you showing here at the show?
Well, I think it's about 3 years since we've seen each other.
It is. Since you got the Homebrew Hero Award as well.
Right, yes, that's right. 2019, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
So the QCX single band CW transceiver has been tremendously popular, and that one, I retired the original QCX and replaced it with QCX Plus, which is in a larger format and has a very nice aluminium enclosure that goes with it, and a conventional sort of desk-mounted front panel, front-facing front panel. And then there were some people who loved that but said, we'd like you to keep going with the old one because it's more suitable for portable operations, it's smaller. And there was a German company selling aluminium cases for that. So, but I kind of felt, I'd moved on and I'd retired it. And so I wanted to then develop a new, so I came up with the QCX Mini that I have here, which is smaller than the original QCX.
And we have one in the stand here. Obviously, people can't see it listening, but it's about a third of the size of the QCX Plus.
Right, yes. In volume terms, it's about a seventh of the volume, and maybe a third of the weight, if I remember correctly. It's about 200 grams, and nice, rugged, black anodized aluminium enclosure. So between them, the original QCX and the QCX Plus and the QCX Mini, we've now sold almost 18,000 of them.
Wow.
Since the launch in August 2017. So it's been a massive hit.
Huge success. Huge success.
And then the other one I was working on during the pandemic, which finally launched in October 2021, was the QDX, which is now very popular and is a 5-band digital modes transceiver.
Sure.
It was originally going to be 4 bands, 80, 40, 30, 20, but it also works very well on 60.
So is it 5 bands, you can select the band, or is it built per kit?
At the moment, it's only 80, 60, 40, 30, 20.
Right.
I'm planning in the near future to make a high bands version, which will be 10, 12, 15, 17, 20, and a low bands, which is 80, 160, and 630.
But I think on the QCX, you originally had to choose which band you wanted to work with, is that right?
You do, yes.
Whereas the QDX, you're saying you can switch bands?
Yes, it's 5 bands all included, and
brilliant.
So it's got pin diode switching between the bands and the transmit-receive switching. It has a built-in, very high-performance USB sound card, 24-bit USB sound card, as well as a built-in USB serial COM port for CAT control. So you literally have a single USB cable to the PC that you use with your WSJTX software for FT8 or JS8 call for JS8 or whatever you're using, and select the QDX as the sound card on the software and set up the COM port that's connected to the serial port for CAT control. And it's like a sort of radio modem. You plug the antenna in one side, the computer in the other side, and it just gets on with it.
Fantastic. So it's really interesting products. So what sort of power output do we have?
It's a 5 watt
5 watts, okay. So for digital modes, that's adequate, isn't it, really? Especially for things like Whisper and those sorts of modes. And
it's plenty.
Those narrowband modes,
I've been having QSOs routinely around Europe every day, and if I'm lucky I get to America, Japan, Australia if propagation is good, and so that's €65, $69 for the kit, and €19 for the enclosure.
And I have to say, it's a very tiny, compact.
It is, most people when they receive it, the first thing they said is, it's so tiny. It was tinier than they expected.
Half the bit's missing or something. Now I can see on the board there we've got some surface mount. Are they pre-mounted, or do you have to?
They're all pre-mounted. So the main surface mount is on the bottom of the board, and there's a couple of chips on the top of the board. That's all pre-mounted, so the only thing you have to do is the Torres capacitors and connectors. And I can build one in about an hour, but I've had practice.
You've had a lot of practice.
Most people it will take 2 or 3 times longer than that. The manual is very detailed, as with
absolutely. I've seen the manuals, fantastic quality. And what you're finding is selling best here at the show?
At the moment, QDX. This has been because we had trouble with parts shortages and. The first batch was 500 kits, which I actually made before the pandemic, and I was just working on finishing the firmware. And they sold out in 14 minutes from when they went on sale. And then I had enough parts to make another 385 kits.
Right.
And they went on sale in December. that sold out in 4 minutes 44 seconds. And so, and then it was another 6 months, and I had to redesign around a new ADC chip, because the original one I was using had gone obsolete. So I had to find a new replacement for that, and it required redesign because it has a differential input. But I was actually then able to improve the noise floor by about 8 dB with the new chip. And also the common mode noise rejection. And
we're hearing a lot of this from lots of different manufacturers saying that they're having to redesign products to work around part shortages, which is
I think that's what you have to do these days. Things are going obsolete or unobtainable or ridiculous prices, and you just have to keep being nimble and substituting, if necessary, redesigning and finding new sources. It's very difficult. The days when you could just go on the DigiKey website and always have whatever you wanted, click, 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 and 3 days it was in your hands, it's just gone. So it's very hard. So now, I've made in total 4,000 of these QDXs, and so about 3,500 of them have been sold. 3,500 have been sold, and I had 100 here at the exhibition, and almost all of them have been sold. So that's been good. The most popular product.
Excellent. Okay.
QSCX Mini is the next most popular.
Yeah.
Then I had one more new product as well, which was the U4B balloon tracker.
Okay.
So it's a tiny board, about 3 centimeters by 12 millimeters in size, which contains almost a complete sort of tiny computer and transmitter, and it weighs 1.8 grams. And that's putting on a tiny balloon, helium or hydrogen, and we can track that around the world. So it's a
so is that
nice
like an
hobby.
APRS tracker? Or
It's not APRS, it uses HF,
Okay.
and the provided tracking solution uses Whisper.
Okay.
And so we have a complete tracking solution. You just register your flight on the QRP Labs website, and you'll get the live map automatically. If you want to go further with it, it also has 19 GPIO pins and an I2C bus, so you could add more sensors, you could get more telemetry sent back.
Oh, okay, so things like height and air pressure, that sort of thing.
Right, you could add pressure, you could add humidity, anything you want to add. You can also use it to transmit other modes.
Sure.
So it's basically very basic flight. You just put your call sign in and go.
Yeah.
Or more complex, you can configure it to do almost anything you want.
Wow.
So that's been another new product. I only made 250 of those, and they were sold out in a week.
Wow.
And then I had to try and get new parts, so I'm waiting on GPS modules.
So is that something that came from a suggestion from a customer? Or
Yes, I did. I've been working with Dave VE3 KCL on that project since 2015.
Wow.
When he suggested it.
So there's also demand then. It sounds like you sold a lot already. So
yeah. I mean, the 250 sold out in a week. There's quite a good demand for it. Unfortunately, back in 2015, there was nobody else who really did it, whereas now there are quite a few competitor products. But this is still the lightest and smallest and most flexible and lowest cost. So it's very popular too. So I just need more parts to be able to make more now. Yeah. And that's the challenge, Yeah. But so we've managed to grow despite the challenges, and very, very busy, very stressed, but it's good to be busy and stressed.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if you're kind of, you're working this on your own. I can imagine it can be quite, you're not only developing new products, you're also supporting all these existing products and taking queries and sales.
I do have several people working with me in Turkey on packing and shipping and things and assembling kits, but it's most of it is on my head. The design, development, support, documentation, web, procurement, manufacturing.
And you're also around the world. I mean, now the shows are back on. You've been at Dayton, you've been here in Friedrichshafen.
Yeah, I was in Dayton in May, and I came back. I recovered from the COVID-19 I caught over there, and I still haven't recovered from the email backlog that built up in those 8 days.
I cannot imagine what your mailbox is like.
It'll be the same. After this one, I struggled to catch up. There are many challenges, but I'm still having fun. So
that's the main thing. Absolutely, very good. Hans, thank you very much for your time. If
you.
people want more information or want to place an order or just find out about your products, where's the best place to go?
Just go to the website. So it's qrp-labs.com. qrp-labs.com.
Great. Hans, thank you for your time, and we'll see you probably no doubt in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Here again at Friedrichshafen Ham Radio 2022. I'm joined by John Hubson from SDR Play. John's call sign is G4ABQ. Hi, John.
Hi, Chris.
And nice to see you again.
Likewise, after quite a gap.
Yes, well, it's certainly in person.
Yeah.
Now, we spoke to Andy I think it was back in March. We were down at Hamzilla, so we got a bit of an update from Andy back then. But I think things have moved on a little bit. I know there was a big announcement at Dayton for SDR Play. So, John, perhaps tell us a little bit about what's been happening more recently.
Yes. So what we announced at Dayton is our new multi-platform version of SDR Uno, which was always on the roadmap as SDR Uno version 2. We are well underway now with this rewriting work, which has actually grown out of all proportion. It's turned out to be a real major challenge to have ultimately software which will truly work on all those different platforms that people have been demanding. So that's on not only Mac OS, but for Intel, but for the M1. It's on ARM, it's on Android, and we have now got the core DSP software working, and we unveiled that at Dayton with a demo running on a Mac OS M1, and here at Friedrichshafen for the first time we're showing that core technology running on Raspberry Pi.
Fantastic.
So Linux, Raspberry Pi, and that's in the on the Funk 24 stand here at
so you're here obviously with a reseller on their stands. I think you're on your own, John, aren't you, pretty much, for SDR Play?
Yeah, pretty much. But we have a great network of support from our other resellers here.
Yeah.
So we've got Passion Radio here, we've got Bonito, Funktechnik Dart, all with displays and various other demos.
It was great to see, actually, walk around the hall today. There were so many other stands with SDR Play on the stand and actually showing the product. So it's obviously, it's working really well.
It's great to fill the vacuum left by some of the bigger names. Which,
yes,
we haven't seen this time.
There have been a few big names missing, I think, haven't they? But it's nice that SDR Play here and that your customers and your potential customers are able to see the product now.
SDR Connect. The key thing that we've still got to do is the graphical user interface.
Sure.
So what our demo is showing is just the core DSP engine, which is actually the really hard behind the scenes stuff, as well as connectivity capability, and we're actually showing access to a remote DX using an SDR Connect server back in the UK.
So that was the thing I think I saw it on the social media. There was a demo of the product in Dayton. I think it was Steve, wasn't it, over in the States, who had the kind of front end on a machine, on a computer running in Dayton, but the actual receiver was sat in the UK somewhere, and they was able to tune it. And
we're doing the same here in Friedrichshafen, this time with the SDR Connect software at this end on a Raspberry Pi.
Okay. So that's quite exciting, and the Raspberry Pi's got enough power then to do what you want.
So it's working out pretty well. When we get it all the GUI done, we think it'll probably be December before we're releasing version 1 of what will be called SDR Connect.
Sure. Okay. Sounds very interesting. And I can really see how that can be a useful thing, having that being able to have a remote receiver somewhere could be really useful.
Yeah.
We've
been able to do that with third-party software up to now, like SDR Console, for example.
But I'm guessing now with SDR Uno becoming SDR Connect, and it become multi-platform, when you're no longer having to rely on those third-party or those other pieces of software, you can now run the native SDR Play software on whatever device pretty much you've got.
And we're doing all we can to make sure that we're compatible not only with the current products, the RSP-1A, the DX and the Duo, but also the RSP-2, the RSP-2 Pro.
Okay.
We're unable to make it compatible for the very early RSP-1, the very first product.
Yeah.
But we'll still provide support for SDR Uno 1.42, which is due out in the next few weeks for all users.
That's excellent. Okay. So you mentioned that they're still working on the GUI. So how is that will that be similar to how it works today, or is that a kind of difference?
So the challenge for us is to have something that really does replicate all those loved features of SDR Uno. So a lot of the look and feel should be very familiar, but some of the annoying features will be fixed.
Sure.
And it'll be fully scalable. All the panels will lock together nicely. So we've tried to listen to our customers over the few years that we've been supporting STR Uno and growing it, and fixing those. So there'll be additional menus and options, and hopefully it will be a visible step forward.
Sure. And things like plugins will still be there, I guess?
Plugins will still be supported. We're working with our plugin developers, or we're making sure that, in fact, we made sure originally when we picked our tools for plugins that these were truly multi-platform compatible.
Sure.
So there'll be a bit of work to do for the plugin developers to transition across, but it's pretty minimal.
Sure.
And there's core compatibility built in. In fact, as we've been saying for the last couple of years, whenever we've developed any new code, we've made sure that core code can translate across.
Yeah.
The big work that we've been showing is the rewrite of the actual DSP engine itself and the connectivity.
And that's
stuff.
not a small feat.
That was not a small feat. And in fact, it includes the graphical representation of what we call the SP1, the spectrum display itself.
Okay.
Just the work that goes into ensuring that how it all looks filled in under the spectrum display itself. That's quite a intensive coding exercise, and that had to be completely redone in a form that would work across all those different platforms.
Sure.
So,
okay. Sounds very exciting, and I'm guessing the community, I know, always get involved in the products and in terms of providing feedback, but also in terms of support. I know that you got Mike and Steve in the States, you've got the guys over here.
Yeah.
I guess you're going to be doing videos and
absolutely. As with prior versions of STR Uno, we'll be also doing updated support videos and so on.
Sure.
So, and actually those guys in the States and many of the people who run independent forums around the world are really our ears and eyes in terms of feeding back the sort of features and capabilities that are going to be added on top of what we're already doing in the upcoming STR Uno 1.42.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Well, John, thank you very much. It was only a quick update because we'd obviously got a lot of information previously from Andy, so we're not going to cover all ground. So thank you very much. If people want to get more information, where's the best place to go?
Best place is strplay.com.
Perfect. Thank you, John, and thanks for your time.
Chris.
Have a great show. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're here back at Friedrichshafen again, and we've come to a stall from the Black Sheep Pub Ham Radio Group, which, as you can hear, sounds a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm here with Giuseppe, who is the leader of the group for this year, and we want to ask him generally, how did it get started? And he's already told us it's an international group with digital voice capabilities, and also I think embracing the social side of the hobby as much as the technical side. Giuseppe, how did it all start?
Yeah, first of all, good morning, of course, to every one of you. I'm Giuseppe, Oscar Kilo 8 Golf, and IK5YJ. And the story is, quite, let's say, funny, because we were a group of friends, mainly Tuscany friends, Italian friends, and some expats, Italian expats. We were using a digital net set up in Tuscany, a multi-protocol digital net. But in that group of people who set up that system, there was 2 or 3 persons they were acting like sheriff. So whenever someone was getting in, maybe trying just to push the PTT without having set up the call sign or something like that. It was not registered in the DMR group. So these 3 guys, they were treat them like some like a thieves, someone. They were shouting like that. You have to register. You cannot press the PTT like that. So we were very upset about that. And one day, we decided we cannot stay there because, it's unpolite. Ham radio is a hobby. without barriers, without religions. So for us it was unbelievable. So that's why Giuseppe had an idea. Giuseppe G0BUS had an idea. Say, hey guys, I will be able to set up a server, and we can create our digital net. Why not? We said. So the idea started to grow up, and we say, well, we are Italian. Giuseppe is living in London, in Bedford, in England. I'm living in Prague. And other friends were living in England too. Another one was in Australia. So we said, why we do something for the Italian expat, a open digital net where anybody can come. The only thing we ask is just respect. That is our rule. The only rule is respect.
And I guess the normal language would be Italian, because you're all Italians.
Well,
Italian
we are
expats.
open to any language.
Yeah.
So we speak English, we speak Italian. We have lots of visitors from all parts of world, and so when we see the call sign, we switch. If we are talking in Italian, we switch in English. We can speak Czech, we can speak English, French, Spanish. So everyone is welcome in this digital net.
Well done, I have to say. Good. And because why did you pick the name of it being a pub?
The name is funny because, as you know now, the black sheep is the sheep that is not following, let's say, the group, okay? Not the rules, because we are not, but the groups, so
groups,
it's another point of view.
Yep.
So the black sheep has another point of view, and that's why we have another point of view. We believe that the ham radio hobby must be open to anyone, cannot create any kind of barrier. We can talk about any topics in this digital net. The only thing we ask is just respect for anybody, and that's, is what we are doing, and it works. It works.
Yeah. I'm still coming back to the same question though. Why? Okay, the black sheep part of it, but
the
why
pub? Yes, the pub. It's funny because it was one day it was me that he said, "Hey guys, this is like a pub, because we are talking, and we can simulate it. We are in a pub with a beer beside us, and so talking and drinking. So that's why it came up this idea, no?
Okay.
So it means that anybody can come in, has to feel, must feel like, in a very nice place, so he can really enjoy drinking a beer and talking with friends. That's why.
Okay, that's fine. Well, Giuseppe, thank you very much for the few minutes with us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and you wish your group, obviously, all the success in the world. ICQ Podcast also has a digital group with very similar wishes that everybody is welcome.
Yep.
And I think that's good to publicise that of your group, our group. It's part of the amateur radio feeling is friendliness and openness.
Yes,
and we have to keep pushing that.
We see now the world is full of barriers. People are really making a war just to defend their barrier. So, and ham radio, we must say to the world that there is another point of view, there is a black sheep point of view.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe. Oh, your website, please.
Okay, our website is www.theblacksheep.uk.
Thank you, and
visit 73. Us. We are in Facebook. We are in the web, and we are in the radio. So you are welcome anytime.
Thank you, Giuseppe.
Okay,
and 73.
73.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland. 73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, everybody, I really hope you've enjoyed our roundup of the Friedrichshafen show that Chris and Ed were at recently, and so hopefully their interviews, not only kept you up to date what's going on, but may also whet your appetite for a trip to the south of Germany in, say, next summer. Now, feedback this episode, we got an email from an amateur, Jacob, KK7 Charlie Golf, and Jacob was looking for help in relation to getting a call sign for the African state of Benin. Now, basically, what we did is we pointed Jacob into the direction of the embassy. And suggested he has a chat with them in relation to how he might be able to obtain a license to operate there. As obviously we were thinking of things under the SEPT agreements, etc. So Jacob advises being a Class B license holder. He'll contact the embassy as he have not been say this might be a better way of doing things. Now, we've also had some feedback from our colleague Ed Durant as well, who believes that they're not a signatory to either TR61/01 or to RECO 5506, which basically means the fact is that there may not be a SEPTA agreement between the two. And some further research by Ed suggests that a lot of the call signs in use locally in the African state that are used by visitors predominantly from France who are local in the area. So say local hams and local organisations might be quite difficult to find in that case from there. So look, as always, I think we got you pointed in roughly the right direction, which is the main thing. And I say from there, I'm sure you'll get the service and requirements you require. But I say interesting to say that the state of Benin, doesn't have a reciprocal rights agreement potentially, and also say operating there might take a bit more effort, which probably more than anything else, Dad, does bring back that great preparational thoughts that when you're traveling, you need to check in advance what the license conditions are for the country you're visiting to obviously make sure that, you are allowed to license and operate in those countries.
Certainly are, Colin, and the SEP agreement doesn't cover you everywhere in the world, or none of these agreements cover you everywhere. Sometimes you turn up, and if you can prove that you're a licensed ham, sometimes they will issue you a call sign for a short period of time, but it really does depend on the country, and I've not had any personal experience with this, so I'm going to decline any more experiences on this one. I say, I know when I go to Ireland, Germany, France, Cyprus, or the States, I'm covered by reciprocals, but I would certainly start the way we've suggested to Jacob if I had to go to this place. So there you go, Colin.
No, exactly. So I say preparation. Well, I say prepare. So as I say, that certainly seems to be the mantra there. Well, we'll say it's our birthday month this month, and the ICQ podcast is 14 years old. So we'll say we've got some fantastic opportunities to help out and show your support for the ICQ podcast on our donation page, which can be found at icqpodcast.com/donate. And we'd like to thank the first of the donors who kindly, found their way there and wished us happy birthday wishes. So we'd like to thank Dino Kilo Lima 0 Sierra and Phil VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot for very kindly supporting the ICQ podcast on its birthday, and sending a very kind donation, wishes and birthday presents, etc. to not only ourselves, Dad, but also the full team. So we really do appreciate, guys, you helping out. This month really is a great opportunity for everyone to get involved and to give us the base to run to the end of the year. So please, guys, please do visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where we would really do appreciate for everything that comes our way. And it shows your value for the show and the work that we're all doing. Right, well, with that done, Dad, as I say, I'm going to scarper back to my sick bed and try and get rid of the last of the COVID, which I've done my best to try and avoid for the last 2 years, and unfortunately has struck me down this week. So I'm going to, bid you as 73s, bid, yourself an opportunity to go get Mum a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit, etc. And more importantly, hope that all of our friends, colleagues, etc., keep healthy and safe out there, and look forward to seeing them in a fortnight's time. So I'm going to bid 73s to you, and I hope you look after Mum with a lovely cup of tea.
Will do, Colin, will do. 73 all.
And catch up with you all in a fortnight's time, 73s.